Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I am the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. I am a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your comments or questions for my guest or myself into the comment box, and you'll see me turn my head from time to time. Today's guest is a self-appointed glutton working under the Spear Writes moniker. Jeffrey Spear is an accomplished journalist, food writer, and cookbook author, developing stories, industry insights, and recipes for trade and consumer audiences. Some of the publications he's worked with include National Culinary Review, Food Technology, Plate, The Local Palate, Edible, and many others. He has also written several cookbooks and has developed recipes for clients on every continent except Antarctica. His most recent book, My Life in Gluttony, A Culinary Adventure, received a gold medal from the Florida Book Awards. He is the most food-curious person I know. Let's welcome Jeff.
Hi, Dara.
Hi, Jeff. It's been so long. Just to let everybody know, Jeff's here in my apartment and made the perfect guest. So we're going to have a great time today. He's a good friend. So, Jeff, what's on our plate today other than doing the show? Because once the show's over, what do we want to do?
Well, I'm visiting Baltimore, and there are a number of culinary destinations that I'm curious to try. There's a bakery, a couple of food stores, or I believe there's a Russian grocery store that we want to investigate, see what kind of goodies they've got. So, and then this weekend we're going up to Fancy Food, so that's a lot of adventure. So, plenty
Yes,
to
it
do.
is.
Yeah.
As I ask other guests on the show, tell me about your family table.
Well, my mom was the cook in the family, all the aunts and uncles. She was the one that was the cook. And we always had meals prepared from scratch every night. Um, I've learned over time that some of the stuff she prepared, it was the typical, mid 50s, early 60s stuff. We had Chef Boyardee ravioli, and we had,
Hmm.
stuff in the freezer that, toaster oven stuff and what have you. But she cooked, and so she was always making stuff. My fondest memories are watching her bake, and I didn't understand anything about baking, but she would be using the blender or the mixer and making whipping egg whites into stiff peaks. And I thought it was whipped cream. I go, "Ma, I want to try. She goes, "No, you don't want this." but she was a good cook, and so that was probably the biggest influence on what got me interested in cooking. It wasn't until my mid 30s that I actually started pursuing it professionally. I found that working in the food industry was more fun than others, and so it stuck.
Right. I'm going to jump around everybody because Jeffrey, we've had a slight discussion, but I'm bringing it to the table, as one would say. What is it with these Dubai chocolate bars? People, if you haven't heard about it, it's the latest rage. Jeffrey, tell me about your experience with the Dubai chocolate bar. I know it's
Yeah.
fairly recent.
Yeah. So I had been hearing about them for a while. And there's an Eastern European market where I live in Jacksonville, and he's constantly posting different things on social media, showing us products and saying, "Hey, come check this one out, or come check that out." And he posted Dubai chocolate one day. So I went over to his shop. First, they were exorbitantly expensive, so much so that I'm embarrassed about the price. But in order to um, take care of my research curiosity, I paid the price. I won't do it again. Um, but they are this candy bar. They're made with chocolate, pistachio paste, and it's this shredded. Uh, what do you
It's Katafi.
Yeah, and it's
Philo.
thank you. The shredded phyllo stuff. There's a Middle Eastern dessert called kanafa, and kanafa is cheese and this shredded stuff, and they drizzle it with a
Honey.
and orange floral honey, and it's really fabulous stuff. And so because that crunchy bit was inside the bar, I was extra curious, and I had it, and it was like, okay, it's different, but certainly not worth the money, and it's just not that distinctive a confection that I'd ever want to go at it again.
Right. Well, just to let people know, I saw it was like that's a week and a half ago, that Lidl had the Dubai chocolate bar. And I had been talking the week before with a friend, said, have you had it? I said, no. She says, she can't find it. It comes in the stores. It's out the door. It is a TikTok phenomenon. That's what sort of started it. And there was a dessert shop in Dubai that made this, they called it pistachio katafi chocolate bar. And then it became known as the Dubai chocolate bar. And they can't stay on the shelves, Trader Joe's, blah, blah, blah. So first thing in the morning, when the doors opened up, I got to Lidl and I bought 2 bars. It was a 7-ounce bar. It's milk chocolate. They don't do dark chocolate with this. And I bought 2 bars. They were $9.99, just to give the people listening an idea of the expense. The same bar at Safeway, saw it because it came in, was $12.99, and Fresh Market, the same manufacturer, was $14.99. So if you want to try it, indulge. It was delicious, but I don't have to spend that kind of money. Again, I agree with you on that. Then another note, a couple episodes back, I had Rebecca Bevins on, Dr. Rebecca Bevins. We talked about food dyes, and we talked about, the synthetic food dyes, which is like Red 3, Red 6, blah, blah, blah. On imported food, they're supposed to list Red 3, blah, blah, blah. So when I got home with these chocolate bars, I looked at it. They weren't saying yellow 5. They were saying tartrazine. And had I not done the show with her, I wouldn't have known that these dyes were in there because they were using the technical names. But I also saw that Costco might have these. They do it bite size. You get 41 for $17.99. So people, if you're food curious like us, go get it. Try the Dubai bar. Before this, I was just reading your article in the National Culinary Review. It was the April issue. You did a featured story on pizza, classic versus new flavors, frontier. What did you learn? And tell us more about that article and what went on.
Okay. So the first part of it was just defining what the most popular styles were. And Neapolitan, which is the thin crust 12-inch round, that's the most popular. New York, which is still around, but it's bigger. That's popular. The Chicago deep dish is popular. And the Detroit pizza, which is a rectangular pizza with crusty edges, is also very popular. So it was interesting just to see around the country what was trending, what people gravitated towards. What I was really fascinated by were the number of pizzerias around the country that are breaking tradition. There's a place in I think it's Cleveland, Missouri, called Lenya Pizza. There's a chef there. Her name's Marisol Doyle, and she's using her Latino background. And she has an al pastor pizza, which is with marinated pork. She has a chorizo and papas pizza, which is pork chorizo and potatoes. And then there's a pizzeria up in the Pacific Northwest in Beaverton, Oregon. It's called Hapa Pizza. And the 2 guys, the owner is Aaron. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm going to butcher it. I apologize. It's Aaron Trong, and there's Chef Eldon Chan. And they're celebrating their Asian background. And so they have a banh mi pizza, a red curry pizza, and even a mushroom sukiyaki. It's really cool to see all of these pizzerias going beyond the norm and trying new and different. Just to give a shout out to a chef at home in Jacksonville, there's Chef Tom Gray. and he runs a restaurant called Prati Italia and has these fabulous pizzas. He's now opened up a pizzeria only place called Electric Dough Pizza Co. And they are this old world, new world blend of pizza. So it's a rectangular pizza. It's a thick dough that he calls a Roman dough, but it's got the crusty edges like the Detroit style. And they're really tasty. They're really fun, and lots of different toppings. And so there's lots of variety. I mean, yeah, you can be a purist and have just a Neapolitan pepperoni pizza. I have no problem with that one. It's my favorite. But there's lots of other interesting stuff out there.
Right. And I'm just trying to see what was it? There was something that you wrote for Coast Life. What is Wafu Italian?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do in the course of my writing is I'm always looking for emerging trends, different kinds of foods, things that may not yet have traction, but they're emerging in various locations. I focus on the US, so they're emerging in different places around the country. And so there's this style called Wafu Italian, which is a blend of Japanese and Italian cuisine. It actually started in Japan, where, unbeknownst to anyone, they actually was a cuisine that was merging the two. And so if you think about soy sauce being put into the spaghetti sauce, and it may sound off-putting to some of you, but it brings this depth of flavor and umami. And it's actually surprising what some of these ingredients do. And so it's a blend of Japanese and Italian, and there are only a few places around the country that are really driving this style of cooking right now. But there's also another one called Nikkei, which is, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, and it's Japanese and Peruvian. And it's because there's a tremendous population in Peru. And so these influences, think of it as fusion cooking, but it's actually, there are enough people doing it where it's becoming a standalone cuisine.
I was looking at some of the recipes that you put in: a spaghettini tomato miso sugo, a spicy cod roe with tasu and shiso lemon and nori. That's taglioni with that. Yeah. You have written recently again in like an April or May issue for Food Technology magazine about the emerging flavors of Africa.
Yeah.
And let me tell people that you've been to Africa quite a bit: Malawi, Ghana, Burkina Faso. So tell me more about what you're seeing as the emerging flavors of Africa.
Yeah. So the first thing to keep in mind is that Africa is the continent, and on the continent, I can't remember if it's 52 or 54 different countries. So that's a lot of different countries with a lot of different cultural background, which means their cuisine is going to be different. So to say Africa is quite a bit misleading. Now, that being said, a lot of the restaurants, especially here in Baltimore, there are a number of them. They call themselves African restaurants. They tend to be West African. So it's going to be from Ghana, from Senegal, all through that part of the sub-Saharan West African countries. And those countries share a lot of ingredients, a lot of foodways. And so to say West African is a safe bet. Now, that being said, all of the countries in Africa were colonized at one point or another by external forces, except for Ethiopia. So Ethiopia has its own cuisine without any influence from any European or Indian or anything like that. So it's different. A lot of the ingredients we just don't know them here. I mean, I was trying to cook with some of them, and I had no idea what I was doing. Very unusual, very different. There's definitely a learning curve. The good news is that if you go to cities that have large either African or African American population, so Baltimore is one, New York, I believe there's some in Indiana and Chicago. You can find African restaurants, and African restaurants are a great place to just try stuff. In the absence of having a restaurant to try, it's hard to know what you're doing. That's one of the reasons it was hard for me to cook with these ingredients. I had never tasted some of these things before. Now, mind you, I made an Ethiopian ground beef dish, and I was using Burberry. It's one of the spices. And that actually, when I made it, not knowing what I was making, but I was just following the recipe, but having eaten in Ethiopian restaurants, going, oh yeah, I've had this in an Ethiopian restaurant. I know what it is. But then there are other ingredients. There was one that I opened it up and it just, oh. I didn't know what to do with it. I figured, okay, it's probably like nasty smelling cheese and you just got to get over it and taste it. And it's good. Or like durian, you get over the
Right.
smell and you eat it. This one, no.
Right. Well, just to let people know that you have traveled quite a bit working with the USAID Emerging Economies. And you spent a great deal of time, probably the most recent one was the country of Georgia.
Mhm.
And you've written about it multiple times. You've talked about the food, the wine, and the travel. And I think khachapuri is your favorite dish there.
Yep.
Tell us more about the Georgian food scene.
Okay. Well, first off, khachapuri is a cheese bread. And as I spoke to a Georgian chef, and he goes, it's cheese and bread. What's not to like? The ones that a lot of people see, it's a boat-shaped bread, and it's got an egg floating in the middle. That's kind of the Instagrammable version. I've never had the one with the egg. I always have. They're up to, I think there's somewhere around 50 different varieties of khachapuri, different pastries, different cheeses, and so I'm still working my way through it. But in Georgia, I was helping them develop export markets for a lot of the foods they produce. What I found that was most interesting is that they're one of the primary producers of bay leaves. So now when I open my little bottle of bay leaves in the kitchen, I go, oh, I wonder where these came from. Now there are other producing countries. There are about 4 or 5 that are major producers. Same thing can be said with dried apricots. There are a lot of dried fruits coming out of Georgia. They also are a major producer of hazelnuts. And I believe it's, I don't know if it's one of the Italian confectionery companies are the major buyer of all these Georgian hazelnuts. So they're growing a lot of agricultural commodities, blueberries, a lot of berries, and they've changed what they grow because there's global demand. Blueberries were not an indigenous fruit, but they've been bringing in cultivars that are appropriate for the Georgian landscape and the Georgian environment, and they're doing well with them. They're exporting it down to a lot of their exports go down to the MENA countries, which is Middle East, North African countries. And they export to European countries, the bigger Western markets. But when it comes to actual kind of the foods that are specifically Georgian, they have some interesting spices, interesting spice blends. The one that I got most excited about is one called zafrana, and it sounds like saffron. It's not. It's yellow like saffron, but it's not saffron. What it is it's dried marigold leaves. And many years ago, I wrote a book about the foodways of Northeast Florida and talking about what some of the indigenous tribes were cooking with. And I saw marigolds. I couldn't find marigolds anywhere to validate that they were using them. And then I saw that Georgia, I said, oh, this is what you do with marigold leaves. But the marigold leaves, they have some spice blends that are good. They have a spicy blend called a jika, which is they have a dry and a wet, and it's just this spicy condiment that people like. This condiment made from both green and red plums called kamali, and I've tried it. It's sour, and they use it like we use ketchup here in America. I didn't care for it, but novel, but really good. I like their foods. They're rich, they're flavorful. Some of them, they have stews that are heavy, so substantial dishes, kind of like German is substantial. But really interesting. But the khachapuri, I could eat those every day. They're fabulous.
We're going to go hunt for that. Before I forget, folks, I mentioned earlier Jeffrey's book, My Life in Gluttony. And it's been out for a while. It's more a memoir of all the places that he's lived and been. and foods and their recipes. And it's quite a charming read, great recipes, great mac and cheese. Um, we've talked about the book before. So there'll be a link coming up that you can get this on Amazon.com. And this is the book that won the gold medal from the Florida Book Awards. So check it out. It was self-published, so no gropey publisher behind it. So you might not have heard about it before. And if you're into cooking or you like these memoirs with a little recipe after each story, that's the one to read. We can talk. There were different subjects that you gave me that we could talk about. Let's talk about corned beef.
Corned beef is, well, while mac and cheese and hot dogs are probably at the top of my favorite food group lists, corned beef is right in there. I grew up here in Baltimore. I left after I graduated college, and I've been living in other places. And coming home to Baltimore has always been, where can we get a good corned beef sandwich? So going down to Corned Beef Row downtown and going to Atman's, or when I go up to New York, going to Katz's. I used to like going to the Carnegie Deli. Sadly, they're gone. Actually, when I go up to New York for fancy food, I'm going to try to get over to Sarge's, which is another kosher style deli, just to have corned beef because it's such a good thing. We don't have that down in Jacksonville. Boar's Head makes something that's a really sad excuse for what we know as kosher style corned beef. But whether you like it with, I like it with coleslaw, Russian dressing, Swiss cheese, and chopped liver. And that's my ultimate corned beef sandwich. I will eat it any way I can get it, but that's my ultimate. But you go to different places and they have different combinations, and I just think it's a joy to investigate. Now, mind you, it's a brisket, and so brisket these days is becoming popular too, just in its own, especially in the barbecue realm. So you can give me barbecue, you can give me brisket in barbecue form, corned beef. It's good. I finally gotten to the point where I just tell my friends, look, I'm gluttonous about this stuff. I really enjoy investigating and sampling all these things. And so there's no such thing as too many corned beef sandwiches.
Well, we know that there's one in the fridge to be made.
I didn't know. Oh, yeah.
There's coleslaw, Russian dressing,
yeah.
and corned beef because I was prepared for you. Didn't want to disappoint. We're going on Saturday to a gin tasting. Is there distinct flavor differences in gins? I mean, it's
absolutely. So the thing I learned about gin many, many years ago, and I didn't know this at the time, but gin is a contrived spirit. It's neutral alcohol, so it's like vodka, but it's the neutral base is it's unflavored alcohol. And these gin makers, they put in whatever they want. So they can put in dried fruits, they can put in spices, anything that, whatever they feel like doing. Now, a traditional London dry gin the traditional ingredient is juniper. And so most gins have that flavor profile. But then you find others that they'll have an essence of cucumber, they'll have an essence of citrus, whether it's orange or lime. There's one that I like. I was in New York and was just going around town, eating my way, drinking my way through the city.
What a surprise.
And I stopped into this restaurant that I actually think it was one that you had recommended to me. This is going back a long time. And on the menu was a cocktail made with Dorothy Parker gin. And I couldn't quite remember why the name Dorothy Parker resonated with me, but I wanted to try the gin. And I asked them to show me the bottle. And so I learned a little bit about Dorothy Parker. And I have subsequently, because of the gin, now read a lot of her poetry and read her bio and what have you. But her gin has a hint of cinnamon in it. And it's not a gin that's widely distributed. So whenever I find it at a bar, that's what I have. And I drink gin on the rocks just because let those flavor profiles come through. if you're drinking a London Dry gin, if it's Gordon's or not Tanqueray, but Gordon's and some of the Gilbey's, they're pretty straightforward. Put tonic in it, mix it with something else. But these better gins, Nolitz is a very good gin. There's one that's made from Australia. I'm trying to think of Four Pillars is the distillery, and they make this stuff called Bloody Shiraz gin, and they actually have Shiraz grapes in with the gin. It's a red gin, and when you mix it in a gin and tonic, it gets this lovely pink color, and you garnish it with lemon, and it's this beautiful cocktail. But yeah, there are all kinds of gins. Every time I walk into a bar, there are two categories I research. One is rum and one is gin. And I always scan those parts of the shelves to see what they have. And when they have something I've never had, that's what I try. And so on Saturday, we're going to a gin tasting, and I saw a preview of what the host has put together. I haven't seen any of these gins before, so I'm very excited.
Well, we'll see how that is. And since it's white alcohol, I might imbibe. Right. People, gin, vodka, tequila. I can handle those. Cannot handle bourbon, scotch. Can do a little rum, but that's about it. So let's see. We got the gin tasting coming up. Are you working on any current articles right now for any magazines?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I've got two that I'm working on. Part of my writing is starting to get into travel as well as the food, because for me, I travel on my stomach. So I go to an interesting destination, and then it's, what kinds of foods do they have? So I'm working on a story about, there's a neighborhood outside of Orlando called Winter Park. And on Park Avenue, there's this organization called Main Streets America, and there are all these different neighborhoods that are doing economic revival. Easton in Maryland is one of them that has undergone economic revival, and it's a Main Street community. And so anyway, this community in Winter Park is called the Park Avenue District. And I'm writing a story about it and the foods there. We actually took the train down, which was interesting. It wasn't quite the Orient Express, but it was, it was door to door. The train station it stops right in Winter Park, and they have this beautiful, beautiful park that's on one edge of the Park Avenue. And so you get off the train and you're in this beautiful park. They've got rose gardens and really, lovely trees and other plants, and it's lots of benches to sit at. So it's a great destination. It's a somewhat upscale neighborhood now, and so they have fabulous shops to go to. They have a museum, the Morse Museum, which is the largest collection of Tiffany works in the country. I think it might be in the world, because Tiffany did more than just the stained glass. But anyway, had lots of good foods there. And so if you're ever down in Orlando, forget about going to the theme parks. Go over to Winter Park and check out this place out. It's worthwhile. And for my money, it was much more fun than seeing a bunch of oversized cartoon characters running around. And then the other story that I'm writing, it's actually coming out on Monday or Tuesday, I think. It's in Jacksonville. Every town has the food that it's known for. Baltimore has steamed crabs and crab cakes. Chicago has deep dish pizza. Other cities have other foods that they're known for. Jacksonville, surprisingly, has one food, arguably two, that is unique to the city and nowhere else on the planet. Now, the one that is arguable is daddle pepper. So daddle peppers may have been used other places, and there isn't a daddle dish that is specific to Jacksonville or to St. Augustine. But in Jacksonville, back in the 1890s, there was a large wave of Arab immigrants. So you had people coming from Palestine and Egypt and all throughout the Middle East. And they settled, and there was this one guy that opened a market, and he was making sandwiches, and he wanted to make something for people that it was easy lunch for them, affordable lunch. And he made this cold cut in a pita bread sandwich, which attracted popularity in the early 60s. And it's called the Camel Rider. So I wrote a story about the Camel Rider. Now, when I first moved to Jacksonville, it seemed a little pejorative to call a sandwich a camel rider, but it was a name that it had some problems early on, and then people just accepted it. Some people just say it's a rider. But the camel rider basically is a bologna, American cheese, lettuce, tomato in a pita. But then there are other variations that are ham and salami and cheese and lettuce and tomato. Some people put in yellow peppers. Some people put in onion. Some people change it out for turkey and ham. And so, but it's basically a cold cut in a pita. And there's this one place called The Chic, which is the home of the camel rider. And I used to drive past The Chic every day. And it just looked like this sleazy hole in the wall place that was like, nah, it's long, it's well past its use by date. I'm not going in there. But for this story, being the proper researcher that I am, I stepped in and I ordered a camel rider. It was pretty damn good. I was impressed. And the place isn't as sleazy and as nasty as you think it is. It just wasn't kept up well on the outside. So,
you're a bit of a food snob anyhow. So.
Well, that's true, but this sandwich was pretty good, and it was bologna. I don't eat bologna, and I certainly don't use American cheese in my kitchen. So I made a recipe for a camel rider, which is Black Forest ham, Swiss cheese, tomato, lettuce, red onion, the yellow peppers, and I put mayonnaise. The traditional one uses a vinaigrette. I used mayonnaise and peach preserves, good quality peach preserves. And so there's this nice blend of sweet and tangy and sour from all the ingredients. It came out pretty well. And that's in the story.
Yes. People, before I forget, the information for Jeffrey has come up on screen. But just to let you know that you can find him on Facebook under Spear Writes. And his website is spearwrites.com. You can read a lot of these articles that we've sort of skimmed are up on his website, and his Instagram is spear_writes. So do reach out to him, and definitely look for My Life in Gluttony. It's really a great summer read, and you get recipes as a bonus. We have come to the point, Jeffrey, my dear, to the final questions. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
So I had to think about that because there have been a lot of life challenges along the way. But I think probably the one thing was learn how to manage money. It just seems like if you do well doing that, I mean, I'm a terrible salesperson. I've managed to stay in business for a long time, and fortunately, I'm good at what I do, and that by itself has helped me stay in business. But if I knew how to manage money better, I think I'd be a little bit more comfortable with the process of being self-employed and being an entrepreneur. But so that's probably the top thing.
Okay. Let's see. If you wake up tomorrow with a new talent, what would it be? And don't say a money manager.
No, this has been haunting me. When I went when I was in elementary school, I don't know if it was third grade maybe, and the band guy came around. And at this point in time in my life, I had told my parents I wanted to learn how to draw because my background is in art and design. But the band guy came around and he had a sheet and what instruments you could sign up for. And I came home and I said, "Ma, Dad, I want to play the drums." And then my mother said, "We'll send you to art school, but we're not having that noise in this house." So I've been a frustrated drummer my entire life. When I get a chance, I'm tapping on stuff, and I used to use knives on a peanut butter jar and beat out a rhythm.
2 musts that must be in your refrigerator.
So easily mayonnaise. I use mayonnaise for a lot of things. But the other, I think, is harder to single out. It's dairy, but I use milk, I use yogurt, I use cottage cheese. I love cheese. So I'd say, no, either I've got to keep a cow around so I've got the milk and learn how to make all those other things, or to answer your question, I've got to be able to have a few dairy products in the fridge.
Okay. What was your ultimate culinary fail?
So one of the problems with developing recipes for cookbooks and is you got to try stuff. And this one, it was actually this week, and I mentioned that Ethiopian ground beef dish that I made, and I decided I like any food that you can hold in your hand. When you go to weddings and parties, and they always have the finger food, I love that stuff. And so I like empanadas, I like croquetas, I like small crab cakes, all those different sorts of finger food. So I said, I'm going to take this Ethiopian meat and I'm going to make like an empanada. I'm going to make a hand pie with it. And the interesting thing about the recipe is it has you have hard-boiled eggs. So you get the meat and the hard-boiled eggs on top. So I tried a new pastry. I had made the beef mixture and I did the hard-boiled egg thing. And I made these mound hand pie things. And the pastry was all wrong. The meat sauce was too dry. I mean, it was just an abomination. I don't typically throw out food. It's just not in my character to throw out food, and I threw these out. So.
Well, what can I say? I'm sort of like you. How can I make something else out of it before it goes into the trash? What didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
I think we're pretty much covering it. I mean, the only thing that you didn't ask me about where I find my influences, and so I'll just say that Jacksonville is a bit of a culinary desert. We have some good restaurants, and I'm certainly happy to recommend those if someone wants to know where to go. But I find that I really enjoy when my business travels take me to bigger cities with a larger number of really accomplished restaurants. So I love going to New York. I love going to Chicago, San Francisco. I'm going to Lafayette, Louisiana in October, and that's where Cajun Creole was there. And so, yeah, you can go down to New Orleans, and New Orleans is one of my favorite culinary destinations on the planet. But I'm very curious to see what's there. So getting out and going into markets and trying new things, even when you go into small towns and you go into other countries, and if you don't know what the stuff is, try it. As the Alka-Seltzer commercial, for those that are old enough, try it, you'll like it.
Well, I know that you were joyful on your last Chicago trip. I think you found a pot pie.
Oh yeah, it was at a British pub, British style pub, and they made these meat pies that were to die for. So that's probably going to be. So when I go to Chicago, I go to Manny's for corned beef sandwich, and I think I'm going to have to go back to this British pub on a regular basis to have their pies.
What do you think made it so unique?
Part of it was its presentation. I wish I could remember the name of the pub off the top of my head, but it's not popping to mind. But they had, they were a cylinder. It was about a 3-inch cylinder like that. I don't know how they baked it in a pan or a muffin tin or something. And so it was this really nice cylinder. It was taller. It wasn't like a Swanson pot pie. It wasn't made in a ramekin with a phyllo topping. But it was this cylindrical thing. And then the guy asked me, he says, do you want mash and gravy? Well, I lived in Australia for a while, and you don't have a pie. If they serve it with mash and gravy or mash and peas, that's what you do. And so I said, sure. And so this thing came out. Here was this more vertically aligned pie, and then with a scoop of mashed potatoes on top, and it's drowning in gravy. And it's just, yes, please.
Well, I remember you talking about it, and there is a chicken pot pie in the freezer waiting for you, along with the corned beef, the cold slaw, the Russian dressing, all the things that you can't get the best of down in Jacksonville.
That's one
right?
of the that's one of the benefits of having a friend in the industry. You get to eat well together.
Right, absolutely. Well, Jeffrey, Thank you. I look forward to seeing you momentarily where we head off to the pool. And I'm just going to finish off the show. And thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right, honey. Bye.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, feel free to reach out to me via my email, food@jmoreliving.com, or at Dara Cooks Instagram, and or on my Facebook, The Food Enthusiast. That's my Instagram is at Dara Cooks, and on Facebook, The Food Enthusiast. Enjoy the 4th of July. There will be no show next week. Stacy Woodson, the Earth-centric dietitian, will be our guest the following week. You can sign up for jmoreliving.com for the free This Week in Baltimore Eating newsletter, a recipe, local food news, and videos from the Food Enthusiast. Click on the connect button on jmoreliving.com, and there'll be a form that you can fill out, put in your email address, and then every other week you will get the new recipes, what's going on in Baltimore food, and catch up on our videos if you haven't seen them recently. All shows are immediately archived in video form on Jmore Living's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. We truly appreciate it. I do. When you share our show with friends and family, feel free to go back into our archives and enjoy past shows. As I always end the show, may your plates always, always remain full. See you in 2 weeks.